What?
I don't know if I have the name right, but do you know someone nicknamed Napa? K-N-O-P-A?
Ken-O...
And I probably spelled it wrong. That's his nickname. What you call him? Nathan Saul.
Nathan Saul, sure.
Yeah.
How do you know him?
Yes, he and his wife and my husband and I, and they lived in the same building.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Very, very good people.
Yeah. Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to our class on the Torah portion. Before we talk about the Torah portion, I want to talk a little bit about the season of the year in which we're in. This, of course, is the spring. Although this morning you wouldn't have known it. But now it straightened out its behavior. Probably many lessons we can learn from that. You could start off in the morning cold and frozen, but if you put some effort into it, you could warm up. But in the Jewish calendar, we're in a sandwiched period. A lot of periods in Jewish reckoning of time you would refer to as a sandwich. For example, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, those are the 10 days of repentance. So it starts with Rosh Hashanah, 2 days that are holidays, and it ends with Yom Kippur. What about the days in between? They're like sandwich in between. They link one side to the other side. The same thing from Yom Kippur to the holiday of Sukkot. You have 4 days in between. That's a sandwich period. That's when you're preparing for the next holiday. You're trying to harness the inspiration from the past day. And I can go through the whole Jewish calendar and show patterns of sandwiches in terms of time. Because in Judaism, time is not just something that you pass through. Time has its own energy. When God created the universe, He created space and time. And even Einstein knew this, but this is something that's mentioned by Maimonides, that space and time are interconnected. That's why, according to Einstein, if you travel with the speed of light, millions of light years away, and you come back to Earth, you'll be coming back who knows how many millions of years later, because space and time are interconnected. I'm oversimplifying it, of course. So when we deal with space, everyone understands that there are certain spaces that are more significant than others, that a holy place is more significant than other places. But you know what? The emphasis is placed mostly on space, on objects, and less on time. But in Judaism, it's the other way around. We put more emphasis on time than we do on space, although we do put emphasis on space as well. And every time, has its own message. And from that time, we derive energy to take that message and extend it to the rest of the year, the rest of the week, the rest of the month, the rest of the day. So right now we're in a sandwich period between Passover and Shavuot. Passover is the anniversary of the Exodus, and the Shavuot is the anniversary of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. You have 7 weeks in between. And these 7 weeks, there's a special commandment in the Torah to count the days. We're supposed to count the days, starting with the second day of Passover, and it goes all the way through the day before the holiday of Shavuot, which is the day number 50. Now, let me try to explain the significance of this counting. And it's based on the historical analysis of what happened at the Exodus. The Exodus, everyone understands, is the time when a nation of slaves, the Jewish people, were slaves, and we were liberated. That's definitely the foundation of it, but it's much more than just a physical liberation. It was also a spiritual liberation, because the people being slaves, number one, being a slave takes away your identity as a human being. when people are slaves, they're the property of someone else. They have no legal identity. They're just numbers. When the Jews were herded into the death camps, they had numbers, in some cases, etched onto their skin because they no longer were allowed to be referred to by their names, having an identity. They were just numbers. So the number one, that's a very demeaning, degrading status to be a slave. That's why slavery is such a terrible thing. Not simply because a slave is subjected to all sorts of hard labor and maybe beaten. That's all secondary. The worst thing about the slavery is that you don't have an identity. And they were liberated from that as well. But it goes even beyond that. Being in Egypt was the most depraved country in the world at that time. It was called the shame of the earth in biblical literature. It was a very lowly place, and it had to rub off. You can't just live in a country for hundreds of years and not have the culture of the country, good or bad, rub off. And negative culture rubs off much more easily than positive culture. Can everyone please unmute? No, it's not working. I don't know why. Could everyone please unmute so we don't get the noise here? Thank you. The people became demoralized, and the way it's described in classical Jewish texts, there are 50 gates of impurity. The people at the time of the Exodus had declined, had gone down from level number 1 to level number 49. In other words, they reached the penultimate level of immorality, of depravity. If they had gone one more level, they would have been lost forever. No. I think my son, Yeshua, he knows how to do this. They'll mute people.
I think everybody should be muted.
I told them that. They don't listen. We'll have to wait till I can mute everyone, or else I can't continue. Can't have to mute them.
There's participants.
Oh, okay. No, it's not working.
Yeah. 1 second.
What? Oh. Okay. I'm sorry for the interruption, but it's hard to give the class when there's noise coming in from the people on Zoom. So they reached almost the nadir of evil. They had some redeeming qualities. And the redeeming quality was, yes, it's true that they were slaves and they didn't have an identity, but they did have an identity. They did not change their names. That's the one thing that they did right. And there are other versions that say that they didn't change their language, they didn't change their dress. But for all intents and purposes, they had become like Egyptians. Now, God says to the people, you're coming out of Egypt, you're going to be liberated, you're going to be given a Torah. Because I think we discussed this in an earlier class. Being free without a purpose in life doesn't make you free. Because every human being is going to become a slave of something else. If you're not a slave in Egypt, you'll become a slave to something else. And I think we mentioned this, but it's so obvious that we're living in an age where the youth are all slaves. Slaves to technology, slaves to all sorts of addictions. That's slavery. And it's in some ways it's even worse than being in a prison. Some people actually, I've heard this from some inmates in prisons, that they're so thankful for being in prison because it gave them the opportunity to reflect on life and realize how they've messed up their life and how they can change their lives. So they actually felt, when I would tell them, you know what, you're in prison, but we pray that you'll be liberated, they would say, no, I'm better off here. I'm more free here in prison. So the deprivation of freedom physically is not necessarily deprivation of spiritual freedom. But when you're liberated from a state of slavery and you don't have a purpose in life, you're not really free. So that God tells the people, you're going to get the Torah at Mount Sinai in 7 weeks, in 50 days. But they weren't ready for it. They just got out of Egypt. They still had sunk to the 49th level of impurity. So God gives them a commandment to count the days. Now, counting doesn't just mean counting. Each day that was counted was a day in which they refined one aspect of their personalities. You know, in English we use the word counting in two different ways. You count things, items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and sometimes you want things to count. You want them to have value. So the counting in Hebrew also has that connotation, that you're not just saying today is 1 day, today is 2 days. You're saying that this day counts, this day has value. That's what links Passover to Shavuot. And in 49 days, 7 weeks, they were able to go through a process where they were able to go out of the 49 gates of impurity and enter into the 49 gates of holiness. Because there is a corresponding 49 gates of holiness that match and counter the 49 gates of impurity. What about number 50? That happened when they got the Torah at Mount Sinai. That was day 50. That's when God gave them the 50th level of holiness. You can't get that on your own. That's something that only God can give you. But God won't give it to you if you're not ready for it. So they had to first go through the 7 weeks, 49 days, and then they're ready. And that ties in directly to this week's Torah portion, which begins with the law of circumcision that occurs on the 8th day. And the question is asked in Jewish literature, in biblical literature, in all sources of spiritual literature, the number 7 is the ideal number. The Midrash says all 7s are beloved. The 7th day of the week is Shabbat. The 7th month of the year is the month of Tishrei, when we have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. The 7th generation from Abraham was Moses. And it goes on. There's so many different 7s. 7 is the ultimate number of holiness. So yet the circumcision takes place in day number 8. What's the reason for that? Well, there are many reasons. I'm just going to share one reason. That 7 represents the cycle of time that is within the parameters of nature, because God created the world in 7 days, 6 days of work and 1 day of rest. Rest is also a creation. The concept of rest is not just not doing something. It's not just a negative, I'm not working so I'm resting, because a lot of people don't work and they're not resting either. Resting is a positive thing. It's a spiritual rejuvenation process. So the cycle of nature is 6 plus 1. And if you look at that's time in terms of time, and it's fascinating that every culture, virtually every culture in the world, has a 7-day week. Why 7 days? 30 days a month makes sense. The lunar cycle is 30 days approximately. 365 days, it makes sense. That's the solar cycle. But why 7 days? What astronomically happens in 7 days? Nothing. The answer is because God created the world in 7 days. That's the essence of creation, is the number 7. And it's also fascinating that if you go through the patterns in the Torah, in virtually every chapter, you'll see the number 7, not mentioned as 7, but there'll be 7 mentions of one concept, of one theme. You take the main theme in every section, it'll be repeated seven different ways, or even the same way 7 times, because 7 represents the basis of nature, of the universe. Then what is 8? 8 means you're transcending nature. You're going beyond nature. Only God can do that. Nature, God gave us the ability to be in control of nature to some extent, one extent or another. But number 8 is something beyond. That's the beyond. I have a grandson who just got engaged. When he was a little 2 or 3 year old, his mother took him to the store, Bed, Bath, and Beyond. So when they're coming out of the store, the cashier, he looks at his mother, my daughter-in-law, she says, I see the beds here, I see the baths here, but where's the beyond? What he said was, yeah, we can't see the beyond. The beyond has to come to us. We can't fathom the beyond. We can't access it. We don't have the key to the beyond on our own. But you can never get to the beyond if you don't have the bed and the bath. If you don't have the 7, the cycle of 7, 6 days of work, 1 day of rest, a spiritual day of rejuvenation. If you don't have that, then it's going to be impossible to get the 8, because the 8 is God's province. God controls everything, not just the 8. He controls all the 7, but He gives us a role in the 7. That's why it says when we observe the Sabbath, we become partners with God in creation. As long as we recognize that the creation is not ours, God says, you're my partner. Number 8 is God's exclusively. So circumcision is the process through which a person goes to the number 8. It's something that God gives us. Just like the 50th day is what God gave us after the 49 days. Now, they're both connected, because what is 50 in relation to 8? It's the same thing. 49 is 7 squared, 7 times 7. It means 7 in its completeness. Then you go to the next 50 is already 8. You're getting into the number 8. So you have the same idea that in order to get to 8, you have to have the 7 before you can get to the 8.
That's our 1.
The same thing over here. You can't get to the number 50 without the 49. The 49 is the preparation for it. Now, the way that we count the days, this is the biblical commandment. How do we count the days? The first day that we count, we say today is day 1. Actually, we say today is 1 day, not day 1, 1 day. The second day we say today is 2 days. Now, there's a midrash, which is a collection of rabbinic teachings, that says that the counting has another significance. When the people were told at the time of the Exodus that they're going to receive the Torah at Mount Sinai, they were so excited that they'll finally have this relationship with God and they'll be liberated, not just physically but also spiritually. What do people do when they're excited about an event that's scheduled days or weeks or months ahead or years ahead? They start counting the days. So the people started to count the days in anticipation of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. But here's the problem with this explanation. When people count, if someone tells you in 50 days you're going to meet someone that you haven't seen in years, a loved one, and you're going to reunite with your family, how are you going to count the days? To tell you in 50 days, you'll start saying 49 days left to go, 48 days left to go, 47 days. You'll cross out the days and you think about how many days you have left. They counted the other way around. We count the other way around. Today is 1 day, today is 2 days, today is 3 days. Why is the counting in the reverse if it's an expression of eagerness? And the answer is that the counting wasn't just to show anticipation. The counting was their way of preparing for the event. Because you could be eager to come to a certain event, but you don't do anything. You just wait. This is not how you prepare for something spiritual. You can't prepare for something spiritual by just waiting. Yeah, I'll wait. I'm eager. I'm excited about it. That's not enough. That's part of it, but it's not enough. You have to do something to prepare. Now, how do you prepare for something? You prepare for something if you're an athlete and you're going to compete in the Olympics. How do you prepare for it? By doing the very thing that you're going to be performing. You have to prepare by integrating that process into your system so that when you come to the final tournament, you're conditioned to be able to do it. So how do you prepare for getting the Torah at Mount Sinai? You prepare by refining yourself, because the Torah is there to refine us. So you start refining yourself. You can't do it all in one day. You do it a day at a time. Each day, they would refine one aspect of their character, one character trait. There's a total of 49, because just like I said, 7 is a very basic number. It's the foundation of nature. We're told that we have 7 emotional traits. And each one of those emotional traits consists of the other 7. So it's a total of 49. So each day of this 49-day period, the ideal is to focus on one aspect of your personality to refine it. And that's what they did. So when they said day is day 1, means we have one component of the end result. So they got the Torah the very first day they counted. They already got a part of the Torah. They didn't get the text of the Torah. They got the spiritual energy, but one part of it. And the next day they had 2 parts. They didn't say the second day, because the second day would mean you no longer have the first day. Now it's the second. No, we still have the second. It's 2 days, not day 2, but 2 days, because you still have day 1. You still have the accomplishment of day 1. There's another example of this, an illustration of this that I like to point out. When Jacob, the patriarch Jacob, meets his cousin Rachel, and he wants to marry her. And his wily father-in-law says, sure, I'll let you marry her. Work for me for 6 years. And then you can marry her. And what happens in the end? He tricks him. But that's not what, I don't want to talk about the tricking here. I'm talking about this. You wait 6 years and you're in love with madly in love with someone. So the Torah says something very strange. Torah says that those 6 years, the 7 years, were like a few days because of his love for her. Now, isn't it the other way around? If you're in love with someone and you're told that you have to wait a few days, people will say these few days were like an eternity. I couldn't wait. I wanted to marry that person right away. And here Jacob says the 7 years were nothing. So what's the explanation? The explanation is Jacob marrying Rachel was not just a physical relationship. It was mostly a spiritual relationship. It was they both generated a certain type of powerful spiritual energy. So every day that he waited, he had that relationship, that spiritual relationship. He already had a part of it. So every day he was married to her in one level. So that's why every day was exciting. It wasn't, I can't tolerate the delay. No, he didn't. It wasn't tolerating the delay. He was marrying her, in fact, every single day in a spiritual way, and that's what we do through this month. Now, the Torah portion, I said before, was about circumcision. It starts off with that. But it goes on to another subject, and it spends tremendous amount of time on the subject called Tzaraas, which is translated usually as leprosy, but that's an incorrect translation. Tzaraas is a skin disease, a skin lesion. And another word for it, in the singular, is nega. Nega, which is a lesion, a skin lesion. And the Torah talks about how if a person breaks out with these skin lesions, they have to be quarantined. That's why people thought it means leprosy, because people with leprosy have to be quarantined because it's very contagious. This was not contagious at all. It was a divine sign to people that something was wrong with you, that you were lacking something, and you had to be mindful of it. And the Torah goes on with all the details about what the lesion looks like, the whiteness of it, the hair in it, bald spot, and so on and so forth. And the person would have to be taken to the Kohen, the priest, and the priest would determine whether you are ritually clean or not, whether it's a real lesion or not. And then you'd have to be quarantined, and you'd have to check it again after a week, and then another week. So the Talmud says that this ailment was not a natural ailment. It was a punishment for different sins that a person was guilty of, most notably the sin of Lashon Hara, evil tongue, of slander. That when a person would say something negative about another person, they would break out with this kind of skin disease. And where do we find this skin disease mentioned in the Torah? The first time I believe it's mentioned is with regard to Moses. Moses spoke disparagingly about the people. When God tells him, I want you to liberate my people, Moses says, are they deserving? Do they really deserve it? So God tells him, put your hand inside your bosom, and he took it out, and his hand turned white, as in this skin disease. He's the first person to have it. Who's the second person to have it that we know about in the Torah? I believe it's the second. Moses' sister, Miriam, when she spoke slightly critically of Moses, and she became a Matzorat. She was afflicted with this disease. That's interesting that of all the people who have this disease, you're talking about the two holiest people in all of history. Two of the holiest people. Moses was certainly the greatest person that ever lived, the greatest prophet, most humble person, the closest to God. Miriam was a close second, a third. And they're the ones who were afflicted with this disease. So in Hasidic thought, it explains, and I'm putting it in simple terms, that it's like an allergy. If you're allergic to something, how do you know that you're allergic to something? You break out with some type of a rash. That's a sign of an allergy. Well, that means when the body can't take something, it somehow shows up on the surface. If a person is not a righteous person, they internalize their evil. Their evil seeps in and is integrated within them. When a person is very righteous and very spiritually sensitive, then it shows up on the surface. That's a sign that these are really as perfect human beings as you can be, but they have some external manifestation of this type of skin disease. Another way of putting it is, though it's a negative sign, it's a negative sign that shows how pure a person is, that you're allergic to evil. How many people are allergic to evil? Not too many people are allergic to it. They may not do it, but they're not necessarily allergic to it. But a righteous person, a spiritual person, is allergic to it, and that will show up on their skin when they had this skin lesion. Now, in order for a person to be declared to be impure, it had to be done by the Kohen. The Kohen, which they translate as priest. Why only a Kohen? Even if the Kohen is not an expert on the kinds of lesions, he doesn't know if it's good or it's not good, he has to call in a scholar. The scholar tells him whether it's good or not, but it doesn't make a difference what the scholar says. The priest has to declare it. Why the priest? If the priest doesn't even understand, he's not knowledgeable, why does he have to be the one to declare it? He just brought in an expert. It's like a doctor knows an illness, and what does the doctor do? He gets the rabbi to tell you what the illness you have. The rabbi's not going to be the one to do it. The doctor does it. So here, why does the Kohen have to be the one? And the reason given is because the Kohen generally were described as people of kindness. The different classes of Jews, Kohen is always identified with chesed, with kindness. If you want to declare someone impure, you can only do it if you're a kind person. Who has the right to criticize others? Only people who see the good in others, only people who are loving people. If you're a tough cookie, you shouldn't be the one to level criticism, because your criticism is sometimes not based on your care for the person, it's based on your very harsh personality. Now, who else is described as a Metzora, as a person who has this skin disease in all of human history? There are a few others in the Bible, but the one that's mentioned in the Talmud and interpreting the Torah is Mashiach himself, the Messiah. Mashiach himself is a Metzora who has this skin disease. Now Mashiach is supposed to be the greatest human being, even greater than Moses in many respects. Although in prophecy Moses is said to be the greatest, but Mashiach is in that high caliber. Why is Mashiach afflicted with this disease? So the answer given is, it's not that Mashiach is defective in any way, but Mashiach is the person whose negativity is skin deep because the world has already gone through a purification process and is ready for Mashiach. And that means that there's only a little bit of negativity left, and it's on the surface, and we have to deal with that surface. And that establishes what is our role. We believe, as the Rabbi said many times, countless times, that we're living in Messianic times, and we're ready for Mashiach to come. But Mashiach comes when the world has reached a state of perfection. But we look around the world and we don't see perfection. You'll see what's going on with the anti-Semitism in the world. You see what's going on with all sorts of violence and hatred, and you see genocidal movements. So how could we say that the world is now as perfect and it just has slight external imperfections? So the answer is that, and I think I mentioned this in another class as well, but it's a very fundamental teaching, and it's so fundamental that without it, I think we would give up hope for anything. Let me just try to to describe things in a very negative way before I show you the positive. How could we ever believe that the world is going to change for the good? Most people believed in the 19th century that the world is becoming more. We had a revolution, we had the American Revolution, then we had the French Revolution, we had the Enlightenment, we had people the science was advancing, and the world is getting better. It's evolving into a better world. And then what did you have? You had World War I. And we thought, okay, World War I, that's the end of it. We defeated Germany. Now we could rest assured that the world is going to shape up. And then you had World War II with the Holocaust. And then you had the communism plague, where tens of millions of people were massacred in Russia, in China, in Cambodia, in Vietnam, and all the other, in Cuba, and North Korea. And now we have Hamas and other genocidal, and we're getting people, even in this country, who are showing support for this kind of evil. So how could anyone believe that the world will ever change? You have to become a pessimist when you reflect on the last 2 centuries of history. And the answer is no, that's not true. My whole description of the reality is totally false. That's what it appears, but it's not true. Why? Because there's a fundamental difference between good and evil. Evil doesn't have the power to last, to endure. Because when someone commits an act of evil, what happens after the person commits that act? Either the person regrets it, repents for it, or the person is punished for it. If they're not punished in this world, they're punished in the afterlife. What happens after they change their ways, they repent, or they're punished? The evil is gone. The evil is wiped off, is totally erased. And not a trace of it is left. Sometimes the Jewish teachings tell us that when a person repents out of love rather than out of fear, the evil turns into good. The evil turns into some positive energy. So the evil that happened 100 years ago no longer exists because those people either changed, maybe some of them even went to the other direction, to the other extreme of goodness, in which they transformed the evil into good. Some of them, most of them who didn't change, already got their punishment. They're already gone. So that evil has no longer a basis to exist. On the other hand, when you do something positive, when you do a mitzvah, you do something positive, the energy that it generates can never be erased. You can't erase it. There's nothing you can do to erase it. You can't erase something that is fundamentally godly. So all the good that has been done in the last, not just 100 years, but thousands of years, since the time the Torah was given, or even before, since the creation of the world, all of that positive energy is accumulating. Where is it? But we don't see it, because if we would see it, there would be no free choice. Imagine if you would see all the positive energy that has ever been generated by thousands of years, by millions of people, and all that energy would be in front of us. We would be so overwhelmed with positivity, with goodness, with holiness, that we would not be able to do anything wrong, and that would take away our free choice. So what does God do in order to give us free choice? He allows the evil, which is temporal, it's only here today, or for a short period, He allows that to be on the surface, on the outside, on the periphery, on the skin, if you use the metaphor of the Mitzorah. It's external. Where's all the good? All the good is buried within us, is buried within the world. And you have to drill to access it. It doesn't just come out automatically. You need to work on it. You have to drill to get it. But it's much more powerful, much more potent. So if you ask me, which is stronger, good or evil, I'd say it depends. That's usually the right answer to any question in Judaism. It depends. If you're talking about what is more visibly more powerful, yes, evil is much more visibly powerful. But what is inherently more powerful, it's the good. And that good will prevail. But there's still a little bit, we have to deal with the external. Another analogy the Rabbi once gave, you go to the doctor for an annual checkup, and the doctor says, you're in good health. He says, what do you mean I'm in good health? I have this ache and have this pain. Okay, take a Tylenol. You know, we're basically in good health, spiritually speaking. We're talking about the world as a whole. But we have aches and pains, and we have to deal with them. There's no reason why we should remain with our aches and pains. And that's the job of a Mashiach, of the Messiah, that He's the one who spearheads a movement to get us to get rid of that surface external evil. Any questions? Any questions on Zoom? Okay, everyone have a good week. Wednesday we have our class at 12:30 on ethics of